fictional friends, and welcome to a new episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it is officially the month of October.
October.
So it's the best month of the year.
Yeah.
It's
the most wonderful time of the year.
For us. For us. Listen, everybody who is obsessed with like the holiday season and Christmas and Thanksgiving, for those in the States, I find in Canada we're not a big Thanksgiving community over here. So.
Well, I think in the States, and correct me if I'm wrong, fellow Americans, I'm not an American, but
fellow Americans.
But I think they really like Thanksgiving because it's like the kickoff to the holiday season.
It seems to be. Yeah, no, you're right. I think that's probably the case. And so I guess it's because there's like they don't have like a huge divide of 2 months between them. Like we don't care because it's at the beginning of October for us, so we're like, whatever.
Ours is more like a scary turkey day.
Yeah, it's like turkey with extra pumpkins around. And then officially after that, we're suddenly like, okay, now we're fully spooky for the rest of the month.
Yeah,
guys.
but we're spooky already.
We're spooky all year.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah. So anyway, we're kicking off the month of October on the podcast. And also, you can go over to the website at fullybooked.ca and check out all of the stuff that we'll be covering by now over there as well. But we figured, we always need a spooky topic for the month of October in some way, shape, or form. So this month we're going to be talking about the occult. Ooh. Yeah. So, everything to do with kind of like supernatural phenomenon, things like that, and also like a lot of unexplained stuff to a degree. Sort of like I believe the occult is mostly described as something that's like that you can't really see in a sense. So like things that like witchcraft and like various monsters and creatures and things that don't exist, and like phenomena that may or may not be proven. So think of like a haunted house or something. Do we know?
It's, like supernatural, mystical, or magical beliefs, practices, or phenomena.
Yeah, that's true. You add the magic in there too, which segues us really well into the first episode for this month, because we decided to take a little bit of a deep dive into the history of witches in literature, kind of like where things kicked off and where they're at now, what happened in the middle, and kind of like a lot of the, I guess, like older versus much more modern portrayals of witches and witchcraft throughout history, and kind of what that means, I guess, what that means for like the modern witch now, because of how, like, in many cases they were so vilified previously in reality, but also in literary spaces.
Yep.
Anyway, so before we start with all of that, because I, have some stuff that I want to get through and some points that I want to get through. Shireen, what's on your nightstand?
Well, I just finished reading a book called...
Oh, God.
Shit.
Baby brain.
Baby brain. Oh, my God. Oh, a novel love story.
Oh, okay.
I had read the back of this one and was, like, waiting for it to come on sale, and then I finally bought it, read it. It was okay. Like, it wasn't a bad plot. It was basically, the story is about, your main character who, she loves romance stories. Okay. She's actually a professor of English literature, and she's tired of reading books about, like, literature, basically. Okay. Like your typical ones.
Yeah, you're very typical. I'm getting an English lit degree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I can appreciate that sentiment. And so her and her friend are part of, like, a romance book club, but, like, a really, like, cheesy romance, right? So they love cheesy romances, and, like, the main character's best friend, she's getting married, like, she's getting engaged, and, like, the main character feels like everybody's kind of moving on with their lives, and so they do this, like, book club retreat every year with their book club members, because it's, like, a remote book club.
That sounds so fun.
It does sound so fun, and all the characters sound really fun. But this year, for some reason, like, nobody can go to the retreat except the main character. And it's like, she's had a really tough year because she was supposed to get married, like, I think about a year before.
Okay.
But her fiance left her at the altar, basically. Like, really sad. So her own love story sucked.
Yeah.
And what had happened was the author of her favorite romance series died before she finished the series. So, like, this author had died about a year previously as well. So not only had she lost her, like, wedding and whatnot.
She lost her maybe escapism and stuff, her sense of,
So she had, like, read and reread these books so many times that she knew them off by heart and the characters, and she just loved them. Anyway, so she decides to go on the retreat by herself.
Okay.
Because she's like, fuck it. Like, I need my retreat for my sanity, and she's got, like, boxed wine in her car or whatnot. Anyway, so she's, like, driving along, and her car breaks down, and she ends up in this small town. And lo and behold, the town is actually the town from her books.
Oh, okay.
And all the characters are the characters
based
from her
on
books.
people from, like, obviously the author was inspired by people.
No, they are the actual characters, and they don't realize that they're in a book.
Oh, it's one of those.
Yeah.
It's more of like a magical realism kind of thing. Oh, okay.
So it's pretty good. And then she like meets this one guy who's like not in the books, and she's like, I don't know who he is, but he's in this story, and he's trying to get her out of the town. And so like she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't want to leave because like she's found her escapism. Like, why would she leave? Anyway, it's not bad. Like, it's pretty good. My only issue with it is that the author keeps getting stuck on these like one-liners that like you wouldn't typically see in a book. Like, there was one that she kept saying, and I was like, what? Like, nobody writes that? And then she probably put it in the book like 7 times.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh man, like, can we just write better? But anyway.
Yeah, it is when it takes you out of a little bit. No, I get it. Everyone, we all, you read a story every once in a while and you develop a bizarre pet peeve for the way something is written. Because it's everything subjective, right?
Exactly. So. Yeah, but otherwise it was pretty good. It was a standalone cutesy.
I feel like I've heard the title of that before.
It's like blue with like bright yellow writing on it.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll lend it to you if you're interested. Cool. What about you, Megan? What's on your list?
So I'm probably 2/3-ish of the way through Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, which is his latest thriller published, I want to say in June or something of this year, if I'm not mistaken. It's this one is set in suburbia, follows a guy named Ethan who has moved temporarily, quote unquote temporarily, we'll see, post-divorce, we're led to understand, but I think there's more to that, has moved back into the suburban home that his parents had because they just moved to Florida for retirement, and he's reliving an incident that occurred when he was a child, in which his best friend and next door neighbor at that time, they were camping in the backyard, and he fell asleep and woke up and his friend was gone. There was like a slash in the tent, and his friend was gone and was never found.
Oh, wow.
And so it's been this big disappearance, and it's been 30 odd years since this occurred, and now he's come back into it and is starting to notice that maybe something else is around in the neighborhood, maybe somebody knows something, and also maybe his friend didn't die and no one's really realized it. So it's like kind of a, like a like suburban whodunit, I'm trying to figure it out, amateur sleuth kind of on my own type of thing. Without really wanting to. Sorry if everybody can hear that. I'm taking off my sweater.
Dinner and a show.
Yay. Just for Shireen, not that she cares. Anyway. So you know what? It's not bad. I don't know. Maybe this one has a bit of a slower pace than some of the other Riley Sagers that I've read, because I've read, like 5 of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Before, and there's like, you always like some more than the others, obviously. I think this one, I don't know, like, it's a really interesting premise, but I feel like it's almost, I don't know if it's like the pacing has hooked me a little bit less this time around or something. Not that it's bad. I'm very curious to find out a couple of things that seem like subplots to a degree. He keeps leaving either texting or leaving voicemails for his, I believe, ex-wife. I don't think they're estranged. I think they're meant to actually be divorced, I believe. But there's never any response, and I'm starting to wonder if the divorce or the estrangement is like really what the situation is, or if there's something else to that as well as part of the story. Anyway, yeah. Also, this is one of
from you after.
Yeah, it's it's a good like a good thriller to keep you. Riley Sager's books are always good for like pay a little bit of attention to what some of the characters, the other small stuff that they're doing, because it'll probably come back later.
Yeah, like in that one, The Only One Left.
Yes, that's it, exactly.
That one was good.
That was a very what's her name there, Lizzie Borden type of one, basically. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, we're not here to talk about thrillers. We're here to talk about witches. Although there are definitely witches in thrillers, obviously. Also. That was like literally as I was like making a bunch of notes for this, I was looking and I was like, but honestly, there are, at this point in time, there are like witchy type novels or novels with witches as characters in almost every subgenre that you can think of. It like we think about it and we're like, oh, it's probably just in fantasy or just in horror, but it's also in mysteries. It's also in romances. Holy shit, there's a ton of those.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They're everywhere. But Anyway, I sent myself on like a bit of a tirade about thinking about things because I started thinking about like looking into things and thinking about like, okay, when did we kind of start seeing witches, or, I mean, maybe they might not have been called witches at the time, but like, you know, if you think of like witch or sorceress or magical female character, female identifying character of some kind in stories, I mean, really like as early as ancient Greece, you were seeing it because there were characters like Hecate, who is technically the daughter of two of the Titans, who's a Perseus and Asteria. She was, that's it, a goddess who was associated with witchcraft and magic, ghosts, the moon, birth. Like she was, you know, like a fertility goddess, like all kinds of things like that. Apparently, according to the old stories, the mythology, she was one of the only witnesses to Persephone's abduction by Hades to the underworld. And she had a magical torch that I think burned forever that she used to help Demeter search for his daughter after she disappeared. Which
I'm
I had
surprised we do not have more books about this, given the whole Hades and Persephone, like...
Yeah, well, yeah, but everybody very much romanticizes that now, right? So, including me, I've read a couple of them.
Oh, so. I tried reading one of them, and I was like, this is terrible.
Anyway, that's it. And she's one of those who, like, you know, she used to be seen in a more, like, negative light, possibly, like, on-off, which happens a lot. But I think... originally, I think she was meant to be more of like a seer, but then over time they made her more of like a quote-unquote witch. So, of course, her depictions become darker as time goes on. And I think the same can be said for like Medea, who was also like an ancient sorceress, basically, but she was also considered very like untrustworthy, basically. Right. And Circe, we've seen like that kind of come back now with more modern iterations, but also like a witch of ancient Greek mythology who was also vilified, right, very much. And I mean, and because like sorceresses and witches, like a lot of this stuff, a lot of the negativity that comes back with a lot of these characters always starts with a female. And I know that this is going to seem like a weird tangent, but I'm going to talk about something right now, and I just need people to deal with it. Because when I think about things, right, where did I put these, like, notes about this? Like, the thing that I find winds up happening with these characters is that, like, the depictions of these women who have power automatically means that they are evil because they're not pious and subservient to men. And as soon as they do something independent and gain any independent power, their depiction by mostly male writers over time generally was negative and portrayed negatively. And I feel like it was easier for men to make women the villains in order to continue to keep them under their thumbs to a degree.
Keep sweet, pray and obey.
Yeah. And I feel like, I know this sounds insane, but well, maybe not.
No.
But
it doesn't.
If you think about things as far back, obviously, I mean, like, you have all of the ancient Greek texts and then move into Christianity, and all you have to do is look at the story of Adam and Eve to see more of that, right? Eve is made in Adam's image because she's made from his rib, which is the whole thing, right? He came first. He was the perfect man, so they created her to be his perfect match, blah, blah, blah. And Eve is the one who eats the forbidden fruit.
Right.
And so she is the one who offers it to Adam. So she is the one who opens their eyes to sin, quote unquote. And it's probably one of the depictions like that people know the best that shows a woman corrupting a man, essentially, or tempting a man. And it also leads into so many future depictions of women being used as objects of temptation and desire that lead otherwise good men to doing something bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because this is like a topic in just many literature classes. Take any story like King Arthur, Morgan Le Fay.
She's on my list, Morgan Le Fay.
Yeah. So you take any like historical text and you're mentioning, Hecate, but it's really interesting because the way that women are portrayed as witches, it's a negative thing. It's a sorceress. It's evil. But if you have a sorcerer or a wizard.
He's always doing something good.
Because a wizard is good, right? Like, you've got Merlin, who's a wizard. Yes. You've got, like, there's hope around the wizard. Like, he's going to use his power for good.
And you have Merlin, who's the source of good magic. And then Morgan Le Fay, who was portrayed as an apprentice of his in some texts as well, who, she has to go to the negative side of things. And in spite of the fact that my understanding is that early writings of hers really more portrayed her as a healer. Essentially, over time, they basically, like by the time you get into, like, the Middle Ages, basically her depictions become more of, like, I'm the bitter half-sister to Arthur, and I'm unhappy because of that, so I will do something evil and use my gifts and abilities for evil instead.
And it's such a trope.
Yeah.
Like, it comes back so much where it's like, I'm jealous of my brother because he gets the throne and I don't. Therefore, I'm going to use this smidgen of magic that I have to be
Throw
evil.
a tantrum about it,
like, I mean, it was in one of the Thor movies recently. Like,
Hela.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. It's true. Yeah, no, it's true. And you see it over and over and over again. And that's it. Like, I think the King Arthur stuff is, like, a good depiction of that because that's something that comes back a lot. So they're like that. And then I also find that, again, like, Morgan Le Fay, she tended to use, also she was one of those that in a lot of writings, she uses sex to get what she wants and offers herself up as, like, an object of temptation and desire. And I really feel like all of these old things about women being objects of desire used to corrupt men because it's the women doing it, this is what leads us to modern rape culture and, like, what were you wearing?
Yeah.
And what did you actually say the word no at any point? And, like, all of those things. And I know that's, like, a really heavy topic and I don't want to get too far into it, but I truly feel that you can trace that back to old texts like this that from, the beginning of the time that people started writing stories down essentially started to portray women in this light.
And it's, it's interesting because you just mentioned, trying to keep women the way that they should be as a good woman.
Yeah.
Chaucer wrote, so I love Chaucer, side note. He was all about, he wrote satirical,
Yes, yeah.
That was his genre, was satire. And so he would have written things like the Canterbury Tales.
Yes.
But he also wrote other stories that are lesser known. And one of them is called The Legends of Good Women. And it's all about various women through history. Okay. So, like, Cleopatra was one of them. And I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. But every single one of them, at the end, she sacrifices herself for her husband. Yes. Or if her husband dies, then she dies also.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's such a satirical depiction of women because it's like what makes a woman a good woman is one whose life is meaningless without her husband, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and I will give Chaucer kudos for pointing that out, like, of a man, as a man of that time period, to actually be like, isn't it kind of absurd that this is always the way that these women are depicted, is that, well, I am nothing without a man, so if he dies, I too must perish. Like, what?
which goes back to, like, this whole topic of witches, right? Because they were independent and they could do what they needed to by themselves. They didn't need a man because they had power and they had, free will and critical thinking and stuff. And there is your negative portrayal.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what it leads into. You also see, I mean, granted, okay, so if I think of, like, Greece, I mean, just some of the older Greek stuff again, obviously they weren't really portrayed as witches, but there is later on a version that I find is, if you think of, like, the three fates of, like, ancient Greek mythology, who had, like, the gift of foresight, essentially, you had, like, the crone, the maiden, and the crone, the mother, and the maiden, or whatever it is.
These feathers won't cut.
I love them so much. They're so funny. We know.
We know.
Anyway, I don't care if Disney botched that mythology. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah.
But what you see when you see, like, the witch version of that exact sort of depiction come in later, it's the Weird Sisters in Macbeth. Those three witches together who prophesize. They give exposition with regards to the character, and they also, in their case, they also provide a warning, which is ignored, but they provide warnings along the way to be like, whoop, I don't think things are going to go very well for you. You know, and in their case, it's a little bit different because they their gifts are used as something just to like sort of filter information to a degree. They don't like their hands off. They don't get involved.
Yeah.
But they're also probably an early depiction of like a harbinger to a degree, right? Like that kind of character who's all there like, well, you know, if you go there, if we go to that cabin in the woods, we don't really know what's going to happen. So be careful if you're headed out in that direction. You know,
and I'm not going to help you. I'll just warn you.
No, that's it. But basically, I find that mostly, and I'm, you know, like we're going to talk about it, things like moving forward, but I find that the majority of the time, especially in these older pieces of literature, they historically basically function as either an object of fear or an object of temptation and desire to do something wrong, basically. Yep. So it's no matter what, they're seen in a negative context as either scary or having negative intentions towards characters. And you see this a lot in children's stories as well, right? Where the old witch or the old crone is always trying to hurt the younger, more innocent characters.
And like lead them astray.
Exactly. Where you
tempt them. Like there's sometimes like a combination of fear and temptation.
Hansel and Gretel is that with the candy in the house. You know, the Wicked Witch of the West is is obviously like a much more modern depiction, but again, an ugly green colored, like witch who only has negative intentions towards the sweet, young, innocent girl. And the White Witch from Chronicles of Narnia, she's a good one too. Again, like tempting for Edmund's character with like, oh, your Turkish delights and this, that, and the other.
Fear for many others.
For everybody else,
turning
essentially.
Them to stone.
Exactly, that's it. And I find in children's stories, it's a little bit more black and white, the portrayal, because it's supposed to be. But again, it's like you're teaching kids from this young age that these, that women of a certain age who are single, they must be evil. There must be something wrong with them.
And that's how they were portrayed historically. And like if you look at like actual history that kind of fed into this, and I'm sure you're going to get into that in a moment, it makes sense how that happened. But there's also been an evolution, so I'm
very
sure
much. Well, because that's it. I find that that's it. A lot of it's weird because if you get into really old depictions, like older Greek texts and stuff, yes, they could be very scary, but oftentimes if they were for younger audiences, they were just mean and evil and they wanted to, you know, eat the kids or whatever. But if they're for an adult audience, it's that they want to seduce men.
Right.
For their own gain in some way, shape, or form, or
and they're
whatever.
Gonna like eat them or sacrifice them or something.
Tempt them into making some sort of bad decision. And I found that I hadn't like read about this in a long time, but there's a poem by John Keats, like a ballad called La Belle Dame sans Merci, which it's a ballad poem. It's written in verse, basically. A knight meets a sort of fairy type witch, whatever, in a meadow, and they have basically a torrid affair full of sex. I think it's like thinly veiled, but I'm pretty sure if you read between the lines, you can figure out what they were doing. Yeah. And it's sort of like this dreamlike kind of affair that they embark upon. And then after this, of course, everything turns sour because the witch brings him into some sort of like nightmarish grotto where he sees the broken and decrepit bodies of all of her former lovers, and he's left there to die alongside them, essentially. This specific ballad was actually, or at least I should say, paintings that were made of this ballad are actually considered to be some of the first sort of artwork depictions of like a femme fatale character.
And it's interesting because you mentioned, you know, like a witch fairy-like creature.
Yes, some magical
There's also this like dichotomy between a fairy, good, versus a witch, bad. And like normally a fairy is taking her orders from someone, or she, you know, reports to someone like a king, or like, you know, or she's doing his bidding or something. And so again, it goes back to your earlier point of there's a man who's giving this person orders and she's using her power for good, therefore she's good. And that makes her a fairy. Yes. But a witch is when she's doing something of her own volition and it's
doing something bad to a man.
Yeah.
and then it's not good.
Yeah.
So I found, like, when I was looking through a lot of the information about that poem, that really had said a lot, I find, because I was like, oh boy, yeah, okay, this one's like very straightforward, like, oh, here, everything's so nice and beautiful, but actually it turns out I was just using you, and I'm going to leave you here to die like all the other men who I've left in my wake before, like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And another, which I know we could have like a whole episode about this as well, but another, I guess, good sort of, or interesting sort of depiction of this, I shouldn't say good because it's actually kind of annoying, but another interesting sort of depiction of this is the character of like Abigail Williams in The Crucible.
Oh, okay.
You know,
I was wondering when we were getting here.
A young woman who has allegedly seduced an older married man who is a pious man and a good man and blah blah blah, even though she's like, 15 or something, and then uses her influence in order to persecute innocent people in town.
Yeah, the Crucible and like the Salem witch trials are kind of the...
We could do a whole episode.
We could do an entire episode, and we might as well, but like...
Yeah.
It's really interesting because the Crucible was, symbolism for McCarthyism.
Yes.
Or not symbolism, but...
An allegory.
An allegory,
yes, yeah.
Thank you. Baby brain people, you're really going to have to be patient with me these days.
It's okay.
It's an allegory for McCarthyism, and, that in itself was a witch hunt.
Yes.
This is something that happens politically. We've seen it happen throughout history. Trying to pin bogus claims on people that you have no way of proving.
Yeah.
And they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they say they didn't do it, then you find a way of proving otherwise.
I mean, historically, men have loved to put unrealistic expectations upon women.
Yep.
And I mean, God, I feel like the Crucible, listen, if you started getting into certain personal histories, the Crucible, you could trace back, you could even trace through, I guess, to a degree, the idea of some of the female characters, like, Abigail Williams or whatever, and like some of the other characters and these unrealistic expectations of women, and just take a look at Arthur Miller's marriage to Marilyn Monroe,
right.
And you get right into the mindset of that
absolutely.
as well.
And, it's just so interesting because the Salem witch trials, I mean, we went to Salem, didn't we?
We did,
and
yeah.
it's horrible when you think about it. Like, being a woman in, like, these very small societies, not very advanced.
And if you think about how much smaller at the time that village would have been as well. Yeah.
And, very little education, very little...
Yes.
There's no technology, and it's all about religion.
Yes.
And, this person is a witch. Well, I'm calling you a witch because I'm mad that you slept with my husband.
Yes.
But I'm going to call you a witch. And now she's for sure going to die.
100%.
Because what is there to say that this person is not a witch?
Yeah, that's
show me how many of those trials ended up being that the person was actually innocent.
Well, and they figure, and the whole problem was sort of like, oh, we're gonna, tie a stone here to your ankles and throw you into the water, and if you float, you're a witch, and if you sink, you're not a witch.
Oh, but you're dead anyway.
Drowned, so it doesn't fucking matter.
And if you don't drown, then you're a witch. So we're gonna burn you at the stake.
Yeah, if you don't hang. If we like use then, like, you don't hang and you don't die during the hanging. Oh, well then I guess you're a witch, and that's fucked up. But then if not, you're fucking dead.
I know. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Terrible.
It's insane.
Just terrible.
It is. It's insane. Now, if we switch gears a little bit, what I will say is cool is that throughout time, you can see how we've, like, to a degree anyway, I know we keep jumping back and forth, but, like, moved forward from, like, much older texts historically into, Middle Ages, early 1900s, even into the 1950s. When the fuck was the Crucible published? Maybe in, like, the 50s or 60s or something?
50s.
I want to say the 50s.
Yeah.
Anyway, even through, like, those time periods, and think about women's rights during pretty much all of those time periods, and, like, what it meant to be female at that time. Now move forward, start to move forward a little bit more, and suddenly we have more female authors showing up and having their work published.
Yep.
And you notice when you start seeing more of that happening, you're much less likely to have the witch character portrayed in the same way as when a man is writing that character.
Oh, yeah.
Because even if you... anything, even, like, from like Anne Rice on, because a lot of people don't realize that on top of her Vampire Chronicles, she also has the Mayfair Witches.
They made a show out of that.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I haven't watched it.
Oh, it's pretty
Is it good?
Yeah,
I have to
actually
get
pretty
into
watched.
that one.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I have just finished the second season of Interview with the Vampire, which was phenomenal.
I need to watch that.
Oh, it's so good.
I need to use your Crave again.
No, it's not. It's on AMC.
Oh, I think Interview with the Vampire is coming to Netflix, actually.
Really?
Soon, yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like AMC or something who have done it. So I have it through like Amazon Prime.
Oh, right, okay.
So yeah, that's it. Anyway, we're telling people
digress.
where to watch stuff. Go watch it. It's really fucking good. I haven't gotten to the Mayfair Witches yet, but it's on my list.
It is good.
Yeah. If you even look at as early as that's it, that witches aren't portrayed as being like negative, particularly. You have your good people and your bad people, but it doesn't have to do with whether or not they're female and have magical abilities specifically. Like that's not really what it's about. So you've seen that. I mean, granted, like if you move into like the Harry Potter series, witches aren't seen as something negative. I mean, like I think Hermione Granger's done a lot to repair the quote unquote like reputation that female witches or sorceresses had previously, right? By being such like like a strong-willed character, intelligent, well-spoken, logical, like a lot of characteristics that she has. But again, a lot of, I'm just named, that's like two really well-known ones off the top, and both of those are written by women, so obviously.
And like if you take like Sarah Moss, for those of you who love them, those books, Throne of Glass has witches.
Oh, there you go.
And they are like pretty kick-ass characters.
Well, that's it, you know? And I mean, even if I think of things outside of like the major like big fantasy things like, Harry Potter and like Throne of Glass and stuff like that, Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman, like that series.
They were good witches.
Does a
Sabrina
great job.
the Teenage Witch.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch. A lot of the, even like the more modern ones now that you see, like the YA sphere has a lot of that going on. What is it, like These Witches Won't Burn, which I'd read a while ago.
There's the Carrie Maniscalco ones.
Oh yes, Kingdom of the Wicked.
Yeah, those are witch ones. Yeah, and I really enjoyed those.
Was that one that I read that had like elemental magic? The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. That's one that, that's it. It's like a school kind of setting and stuff like that as well. There's the Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow that I know is supposed to be really good. I've had it for a while. I really fucking have to read it. Anyway.
I think I bought one as well recently. It's like a green cover with a purple skeleton on it.
Oh, sure.
It's got purple around it. I could not tell you the name of it.
Like, you're like, I remember what the cover looked like, but I don't remember the name.
Don't remember the name. But, all that to say, there's this interesting move with witch characters. Either they've become, like, the main characters.
Yes.
Or they're, like, a character on the periphery that helps the main character with their quest.
Yes. I mean, I find at this point, if we're thinking in, like, the last, like, 20, 30 years, let's say, for keeping it like very, very modern, witches slowly but surely, like female witches are slowly but surely becoming a symbol for feminism, essentially.
100%.
Of feminine independence and power in oneself, and one's own independence as a woman or identifying as a woman, essentially. And you see so much more of that now, and I'm really appreciating that, that's it, that it, like I said, like, that it shows up, they show up in so many different subgenres outside of your classic, like, oh, well, it's a fantasy, so there are some witches in it, like
there's someone in a pointy hat.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Outside of those spaces, you're suddenly getting into things that are maybe more urban set, and that maybe are like a mystery that needs to be solved, so it's a little bit more like real world, but witches happen to exist in it, and this female character who is a witch, just sort of lives her life with that. And then there's a ton of them in the romance genre. If you look for witchy romances, they're popping up all over the place.
Yeah, there's loads.
And like a bunch of like, very cozy types of things. Like what's the one, again, another one that I haven't read that I know everybody's fucking read is the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which I know like a huge, huge, huge one in like the cozy sort of fantasy sphere that I haven't gotten to yet. What else was there in the romance one? There's like the Modern Girl's Guide to Magic, A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating and Demon. I read that one. It's kind of fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That one's like a little series too that has a bunch of different like supernatural beings in each different book kind of thing. And it's fun. They're light. They're easy to read, and it's fun because it's like you're like a little cozy romance, but then there's also magic in it, which is kind of fun,
We always love that.
Yeah, that's it, and you have your mystery types of things, like In the Company of of Witches by, was it Orly Wallace? There have been 2 of those. They're so fun. It's like cozy mystery.
Right.
Set in, I think, a small town. I don't remember if it's Massachusetts or Connecticut.
It's always one of them.
It's always New England because there's witchy shit in New England everywhere. But that's it. Like a woman who is running a B&B with her 2 kooky aunts. And everybody's a witch. They've all got
very Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Very Sabrina meets the book. It's so adorable. It's like some Sabrina, some Practical Magic, some Sabrina the Teenage. We said that already. Some Gilmore Girls.
Oh,
if you throw that in there too, because of like the kooky characters in town and stuff. It's so fun. It's so cute. And then you do still have your straight, like obviously your fantasies, of course, but you do still have like your straight, like more horror as well. There's like the Year of the Witching. That's it. Like all of like the Mayfair witch ones fall a little bit more into the horror sphere to a degree, or like very dark fantasy, I guess. Because Anne Rice tends to toe the line with that one a little bit.
And I can't recall in Mayfair Witches, because oftentimes if you have like a vampire story where your vampire is your main character, there's normally a witch hanging out around there, like in the periphery.
I know that those series intersect regularly in the novels.
So, and I can't remember, like, with Mayfair Witches, if there are vampires as secondary characters, they must.
I don't remember. I don't know about the show, because I haven't watched it, but I believe that there's a plan to intersect the 2 shows together to bring characters from different ones into each other's universes, because the books do that. As time wears on, she brings them together, or she brought them together. Also, like, rest in peace, Anne Rice, for, like, really, like, all of the gothic literature that she kind of brought to the forefront. And also, I know she didn't really get to necessarily see too much of it, unfortunately, the show before she passed away, but I hope that she, wherever she is, I hope she knows and that she's happy with it, because I think it's like giving like a really interesting resurgence to the idea of things.
Yeah, and like if you think about kind of just on that trajectory, yes, rest in peace, Anne Rice.
Yeah.
But on that, in that same like vein, if you think about like the Vampire Diaries, where you've got the witches who are there, it's really interesting because in that series, in those books, the witches are actually the ones with the moral compass.
Oh, God, yeah.
They're the ones being like, excuse me, like, this is wrong.
That's true.
And it's an interesting portrayal of witches, and we've started to see this a little bit more and more now, that if there's a witch there, then she's going to be the one trying to get the other supernatural characters to do the right thing.
True, yeah.
And that's an interesting evolution from where we started with witches,
Yeah, and I think in the last, like, maybe 4 or 5 years, too, we're seeing a lot more of, like, the otherness of witches, let's say, also being used as a little bit of symbolism for, like, queerness, basically, because there are a lot of more modern stories with, like, queer witches and stuff like that. I've seen, like, quite a few of those in the last, like, 4 or 5 years, and so it's nice that it's, like, we're taking that sense of otherness that was historically given to those types of characters and sort of flipping it on its head to like mean something more positive and not always have the negative connotations that it used to.
Agree.
Yeah. We love witches around here.
Oh, we do.
They're great. Most of the time, if there's like a horror of some kind that's got witches, I'll have a tendency to pick it up. If there's a fantasy with witches, like a dark fantasy with witches, you will pick it up.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just, that's the thing, right? Is that's the whole thing with the occult, the addition of like magical abilities of some sort. Add a ton of extra flavor to a story because you can add so many more dimensions to it.
Well, witches are also not outside the realm of kind of what feels possible, if you will.
Yeah.
Like for, people who love fantasy or horror or whatnot, like to have a vampire or to have like a werewolf or something, like this is like really supernatural.
No, I see what you mean.
But a witch is like just a regular person with some powers.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that they're technically human most of the time.
Yeah.
Even in the stories where, like, I don't know, whatever, they retain some form of immortality or whatever it is, or they age slowly, they still feel much closer to a human than something that like a vampire, for instance, or like even something that transforms like a werewolf or a shapeshifter will ever feel.
Yeah.
Basically. Yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys like witches in literature because that's what we're talking about. But anyway, look, if you have any specific recommendations for like books or anything like that, you can let us know over on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at fullybookedca. And you can also check out our Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.